Hi, and welcome back to Bean Talk. Did you know that coffee has more aroma compounds than wine? But how do you even taste coffee properly? Today I want to talk to you about how you should try your coffee, taste it, and how you can improve. So stick around for a fun experiment where you can train your taste palate within minutes. If you're new to our channel, my name is Max and this is Bean Talk Coffee News. This is our Coffee Masterclass, in this case episode 7, and we want to take you from an enthusiastic coffee beginner all the way to a professional barista. So if you want to learn more about coffee, please hit the subscribe button. Let's get back to the video. So if you're just starting up with tasting coffee or just got into the whole coffee game and you want to try to taste the coffee properly and want to describe it, then maybe something like this, the descriptive form from the SCA, might be overwhelming. To be honest, this is even for me quite overwhelming to properly understand this in depth. So that's why today I want to talk to you about the basic principles that you want to learn on how to taste and evaluate your coffee properly. How coffee is tasted professionally would usually be in the form of a cupping. We've actually made a video before about cupping coffee. Maybe we can put the link somewhere. Chances are, if you're just starting up, you won't have all the tools for cupping and don't know how to do it. But at the end of the day, you want to probably try to explain to others how the coffee you prepared at home tastes. So for example, I made a pour over with a V60 with a phenomenal coffee from Malawi, and let's try how you could describe this. So when I first started evaluating coffee or tasting coffee in a more professional environment, I tried to break it down into like 5 main categories. So first off, we have the aroma or the fragrance. So basically, what does the coffee smell like after you ground it up? And also, what does it smell like after you've brewed it? Just give it a smell. Maybe you can already smell a few fragrances out of there. Then, what you would also evaluate is the acidity. There are different kinds of acidity, but first of all, it's important to know, does the coffee have a lot of acidity or not so much acidity? So in this case, this coffee from Malawi definitely has acidity. So I would say this has, for example, medium to high acidity. Then, next up on the list is sweetness. Does the coffee have sweetness? This particular coffee, only very little sweetness. Then there are other coffees that are very high in sweetness. For example, coffees from Ethiopia that are naturally processed. Then you want to evaluate the bitterness. Does the coffee taste bitter? This coffee, for example, doesn't really taste bitter. But then if you would compare it to coffee from Brazil, for example, they have a very chocolatey kind of bitterness. Last but not least, there's the body of the coffee. So kind of what's going on in your mouth, kind of like richness. You could compare it, for example, if you try something like milk. This is very rich, there's a lot going on, it's high in body. Or if you compare it to something like a tea, which has very little body compared to this. So for body, you kind of have to get your own feeling on what body is for you and how best to describe it. But yeah, that's what body will be. After we've evaluated all these things for one coffee, so similar to a descriptive form, but just not quite as detailed, I have here the acidity, the sweetness, the bitterness, and the body of the coffee. And then you try to evaluate, okay, is it low, is it middle, or is it high? And everything in between. Yeah, so this is something very useful that you can use at first to try to understand, okay, what is in the coffee? Is there acidity? How much? And so on. And once you've tried that and understood how this works for your particular coffee, then you can actually try and get a little bit more fancy, I'd say, and try to get the proper flavor notes. For this reason, there was something developed called the flavor wheel. So this is the coffee flavor wheel. There are also some for wine tasting, etc. But basically what this does is, okay, if you try coffee and you say, this definitely tastes fruity, then you can go to fruity and try to better understand, okay, is it a berry kind of fruitiness, dried fruit, citrus fruit or tropical fruit or something? And if you say, for example, okay, is it a berry kind of fruitiness, Then you have here a couple of different berries you can choose from. And then it also comes down to, okay, what have you tasted in the past? So for example, that's why I prepared this. Does this coffee maybe remind you of raspberries, or does it remind you of blueberries, and so on? And so you kind of have to train your palate on this kind of things. If, for example, I would now try the coffee from Brazil, I go, okay, this is definitely different taste. It has more body, there's more bitterness as well. Let's say the coffee tastes a bit more like nuts or chocolate. And so you can, if you've tried nuts or chocolate before in different kinds and varieties, then you can go there and say, okay, maybe this reminds me of milk chocolate or dark chocolate. And if you say, okay, the nutty kind of taste, what is the taste? Is it more hazelnut, walnut, almond, or something else? These are the kind of things that you can try to better understand how your coffee tastes and how to better describe it. This will, for example, be a fun experiment to do with some friends on the weekend. If you want to get more in describing your coffee, grab a few people, because everyone tastes coffee a little bit different maybe. Get some berries, some chocolate, some different fruits, brew some different coffees, and just try understanding, okay, which coffee tastes like what. And then also try to write it down. For me, it makes it easier to evaluate the coffee if you take some notes. Okay, now we've talked about what you should try to taste in your coffee, but how do you actually taste it properly? What is the procedure here? So of course you can go all out and do a cupping, or maybe you can join a local cupping at one of the coffee shops and do that, which of course would be great, because then you can try a bunch of different coffees at the same time. If you just want to improve on your own at home, then just make a pour over, or you can also make an espresso. And what is very important is to not care about some manners or how to behave properly, because you should slurp the coffee. This definitely helps, because you get some more air in there, and it then the coffee covers your whole tongue, and so it's easier for you to better taste the coffee, like this. This way you taste much more than just sipping it. One other very important thing is that if you taste your coffee, do it at different temperatures. Of course, wait long enough so you don't burn your tongue necessarily, but then wait a couple of minutes maybe, and then try the coffee again, because the coffee will change over time. For example, you will have in a colder coffee, you will taste more of the acidity usually. Okay, so once again, if I try this coffee, for example, like I said, I want to slurp it properly, leave it a little bit in my mouth, and then I usually always swallow it. You can also, if you try a whole lot of coffee, you can also spit some out, of course. You don't get a caffeine rush. But anyways, slurp it, and then always try to focus on one thing at first. So I usually focus on acidity first. I slurp, try to understand, okay, how much acidity is in there. Then take my notes, then I slurp again. Okay, now I want to evaluate the sweetness, how much sweetness in this coffee. This coffee, low sweetness. Then the bitterness. Again, take a proper slurp sip, and then try to understand how much bitterness is in this coffee. This coffee, for example, I'd say low to medium. And then the body. Again, slurp, try to understand. This coffee, for example, has a low to medium body. That's the process, how you should get going. Of course, if you have more practice, you can do maybe everything in 1 or 2 sips, but just try to sip it and better understand the coffee. Once you've done that, then you can go fancy and do your proper flavor notes. Try to understand that. Okay, how does this coffee taste? Everything has to make sense. You can't say, okay, this coffee has no acidity, but tastes like lemon. That wouldn't make sense, of course. What I want you to try at home is to get a couple of different coffees. Some coffees are quite different from each other, ideally. So for example, get a coffee from Kenya and get a coffee from Brazil. They are gonna taste completely different. Taste them next to each other and try to understand, okay, which coffee tastes like which. And this will help you to better understand coffee, to better taste it. And then over time, if you also start taking notes, your palate will develop. You will get better at tasting coffee. It's just a training and practice thing. I hope you enjoyed our little journey into the sensory world of coffee, which this video, of course, was a more basic video. You can learn a whole lot more, and we will cover a whole lot more different topics on sensoring coffee in future videos. That's it for today. Please let me know down in the comments if you tried our little experiment and what you thought of the coffees you tasted. I will see you in the next one. Bye.